So why do I like to buy cars that are knocking on death's door or have had something happen to them and are now fixed up and on the road? So it's not just this. Micra wasn't quite so bad. The Lancer wasn't so bad either, but my next project, which is a Hyundai Getz, was a car that needed a lot of work on it as well because it had been damaged in an accident. What makes me go out and buy these things? And of course the Serena parts are fun on that. Well, there's some sort of pleasure I get. And maybe other petrol heads have this feeling as well when they fix up a car that needed to be fixed up a lot. Is that I feel like I've saved something. I've saved a car from a certain fate, or a fate worse than death, being owned by an absolute moron, or a car that's been saved from the crusher, as in the case of this Outlander. Like, if I didn't bid on this car in December last year at Gray's, this thing probably was going to go to a wrecker's yard. For what it was going for, I can't imagine anyone who was buying it was anyone other than a wrecker, and the prices they were bidding at, and also maybe it was being sold by a wrecker. I mean, the car, I reckon the previous owner who maliciously maintained this car thought that would be the end for the Outlander, be the end of the road of this car after 17 years on the road. That is it. Well, to whoever's watching this, whoever owned this car, this red Outlander before me, it's still here. And it's probably still going to be here because it's all fixed up, it drives well, it's all sorted. So all someone's got to do, which they nearly did, is commit to it, buy it, and drive off into the sunset. That's all they need to do with this car. So this Outlander, in all fairness, has been saved from the wreckers. And that's the sort of car I like to do. Something that I can go to the wreckers, go to all the wrecked cars, get bids off them, and save another one. Now, in the case of the Nissan Serena, on the other hand, that's not so much going to the wreckers, that's online shopping. Buying things from places that are a bit unusual. And buying things from different areas of the world to fix this car. Which isn't so bad. But as I drive this car back to Melbourne, on these windy roads in Gippsland area, I feel like I've done something here. I've achieved something by saving this car. It's probably not going to make me any money when I come to sell it. It more or less owes me what it'll ultimately get me. But at the end of the day, this car is still on the road. There is another car from a period of cars that I like that is still on the road. Even if it might not be my favourite car in the world to drive or to sit in or to behold. And that's what I like doing with these cars. I like looking for cars that are defunct, they need work, and I like to save them. It does also mean that people know that I like cars like this, and the trouble sometimes finds me. But I enjoy this. It's a hobby that maybe I'll end up going a bit bigger with it, but it's ultimately something I love to do. Save and write about cars that probably shouldn't be on this earth anymore, in all fairness. What could be said for this Outlander is that it should have been scrapped. Like, in all fairness, it was mechanically totaled. It was 100% mechanically totaled, because what it would have been worth in repairs, okay, it wasn't hard to fix, but it would have been mechanically totaled. And there is some degree of pleasure I have seeing this car go 110 on a country freeway, keeping up with the traffic, driving along almost like it was when it was delivered new in 2004. And it was a car that I remember when I was 8 years old, sitting in the motor show, remember seeing what it was like then, feeling what it was like then, touching every button and switch as I did back then. And now, to be able to fix up those cars, I still remember what this was like when it was new. and what it was like when it came out. So that's sort of where this love comes from with these cars. What I'm saying is, if you're a petrolhead and you really love cars, maybe you should buy just one, it doesn't have to be as many as I do, a car that isn't in the best of shape, that needs to be fixed up, that needs a tender love and care. Because if you give it that tender love and care, you feel like you've really achieved something with this car. You feel like you've actually done something special with it. Even if it's something that's a mundane daily driver. Buy a car that needs to be fixed, that needs someone to love it. I don't like seeing cars go to the scrapyard, especially if they're not completely dead. And okay, this one was knocking on death's door in terms of its suspension and cost, but the engine is still a peach. It still pulls, it's still reliable. It still starts every time I put the key in the ignition, which is more than can be said for some other cars I've owned. And again, you can't help but think, okay, one day someone will buy this car, someone will drive this car. But to think that I was part of the journey of bringing this car back to life, giving it a few more years, giving someone a reliable family car that's a cheap, comfortable daily driver, to me, I feel like I've achieved something with this car. And will this be the last CU Outlander I do? Well, probably not. Now knowing what goes into them, I now know what to look for, and I now know what to buy them for. So, maybe I will do another CU Outlander. I'd like to do a T30 X-Trail, and there's dozens of T30 X-Trail projects floating around, so I'd like to do the car that saved Nissan. This car saved Mitsubishi, well, the X-Trail saved Nissan, and so I'd like to do that. I do enjoy fixing up old cars, particularly old Euros, and there will be old Euros on this channel, rest assured. I will be fixing up defunct cars from German manufacturers, British manufacturers, Italian manufacturers at some point, Swedish manufacturers. I will be fixing up these defunct cars at some point because I love doing them. And I love to see them back on the road, as I do with this Outlander. So, I do think if you're a petrolhead and you want a second car or something that's cheap, maybe you should save a project today. Maybe you should go and find a car that doesn't look like it's in a good shape, that's in a real state of disrepair, that, okay, time consuming it might be, that probably deserves to be given a second chance, like this Outlander. Doesn't have to be anything special, but the feeling I get from saving this and seeing this thing drive and seeing this thing move, registered, and in a state where it doesn't look like a dog has absolutely emptied its entire bodily content in it, which was when I bought it, is something special. Cleaned up, fixed up. It feels like a car that will last another 100,000 kilometers. I've given this thing another chance to be owned by someone who needs a cheap daily driver. Mind you, maybe they might run it into the ground, but at least it's been given the chance. Same with the Micra. The Micra was in a state of disrepair when I bought it. Wheel bearings were shot, it was dirty, tyres were mismatched, and now we sold it and someone has a reliable daily driver. The Lancer, I was thinking of doing that, but I thought I'll advertise it and see what happens, and I got an as-is bite on it. So, again, same deal on that Lancer. I would have done the same thing, but somebody came in and was going to do exactly the same thing that I was going to do, so I was happy to let it go. The other thing that I'm very happy about is now having these daily drivers and fixing them up through wrecker parts, you're more or less recycling a lot of things. It's the ultimate, what I'm doing here is the ultimate act of recycling with cars. You're recycling parts from a wrecked car to put them on to a car that needs them. So you not only save money, you don't need to make new parts. I hear this all about these environmentally sound cars, and I just think, well, at some point, it's going to end up in a wrecker's yard, and all these electric cars, all these greenie cars, all the technology on them, is going to put them in the wrecker's yard at a much younger age than some of the older cars are. So I think, if you really want to be green and want a green car, may I suggest you buy something like a Getz, like you'll see on this channel, Alto, Swift, Jazz, Micra, Clio, Panda, anything small, 5-door hatchback with a manual gearbox and fix it up yourself with wrecker yard parts means all the energy that went into the parts of making those things new has already gone into it. You're just using them again. You're just recycling what is already there. And with this Outlander, there is quite a lot of wrecker parts on this car. The exhaust, for example, came off a car with only 116,000 Ks. I don't know why it ended up there, because if it was for sale, I would have probably bought it and saved it. Although my suspicion might be timing belt snapped or catalytic converter, but that's the only thing that would have put that off the road. Surely it couldn't have gone to the wreckers for so little. But having seen some people's idea of scrapping cars, maybe that might have been the case. And on this car, the same thing can be said for the trim. Some of the trim on this thing was absolutely shot to pieces when I got it. For example, this plastic trim on the A-pillar fell off when I opened the door for the first time. I needed to get new plastic trim for this car. I needed new boot seals for this car. I needed new boot trim for this car. I needed a lot of things that came off that Outlander, that 116K 02 build Outlander. Fix this one up. Same could be said for the lights. Came off a car with even more Ks than this one. And it was the only set of CU Outlander lights in decent shape off a car with 300,000 kilometres. So again, it got saved from the wrecker's yard. All the bits that put this thing together, apart from time belt, water pump, all the mechanicals were brand new. But most of the trim parts, the exhaust, they all came from wrecked cars, which gave this one another chance. And the same can be said for the Hyundai Getz. It had a hit, albeit it wasn't a very major one, but it did damage a rear door, damage the rear wheel, damage the rear shock absorber, rear wheel hub, and also the rear axle. And I pulled off the rear axle in the pouring rain, with oil and brake fluid dripping all over me. So, like I said, I love fixing up projects. It's just something that I think is fulfilling, and I think if you're a petrolhead, you should do it. Just one, but do it. And maybe you'll understand exactly why I like doing this so much.